Everybody, welcome to our very first viticulture webinar for the year. We are hitting it off with early season vineyard weed management with myself and Sonny Murray. And so here we go. Yes, there we go. So what are we discussing today? Today we'll be talking about weeds, of course. What are they? Why do they matter? We've chosen 12 of the most intrusive vineyards weeds to kind of go over today and kind of what most people are seeing in our vineyards. We'll be splitting them up into annuals and perennials, talking a little bit about non-chemical controls, then some chemical controls, reduced efficiency for some of the chemicals and some of the products we may be using, and then building, kind of giving you an idea of how to build your own herbicide plan and giving you some resources at the very end. So first off, we'll start off with what a weed actually is. And so there's a few different definitions here. So it's a plant out of place that's not intentionally grown. That is probably one of my favorite ones. So even if you are looking at something like a clover or, some resources would say that a vetch is a very good cover crop, for example, if it is not controlled and if it's not meant, if it's not meant to be there for you, then it's considered to be a weed. So anything can be a weed, essentially, beneficial plants, herbs, flowers. If it's not in the intended place where it's supposed to grow, then it is considered one. Another kind of nice one is a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. And so this is a little bit of an interesting one for me. So again, if we don't know what it is, if we don't know how to use it, or if it's something a little bit more unusual and it's in a place where you don't want it to grow, again, it's considered a weed. And so there are two main types of weeds as well. So we have grasses and broadleaves or forbs. It's important to distinguish between them so that we can manage them appropriately. Many herbicides are either grass or broadleaf specific. And grapevines are considered broadleaves themselves. So we do need to make sure that we're using appropriate products and not to not injure our vines. And there are annual and perennial grasses and broadleaves, of course. So it's important to be able to distinguish between at least the groups the weeds belong to. So why do weeds matter? And I have a little bit of a snapshot here. So our vineyard goals, what do we want from them, essentially? We want them, why do weeds matter is because, first of all, and most importantly, they compete with our crops. So they compete with vines for nutrients, water, or space. And this is especially crucial for young vines when they're being planted. The effect of competition from weeds is most severe in the first 3 years of grapevine establishment, where competition can reduce cane growth and delay fruit production. Grapes can tolerate some weed pressure, but it all depends on vine health and age of the vine, and most nutrients and the amount of nutrients, and water availability in the soil and the soil type itself. Soil characteristics can play an important role in weed management. So texture, organic matter can influence the composition of weed species present, the number and timing of cultivation required, and the activity and residual effects of herbicides applied. Some type of insects or some type of insect pests and diseases can be harbored in a humid or moist canopy created by the foliage overcrowding. So for example, our downy mildew, which is one of the more persistent problems that we have here in Nova Scotia. So a dense canopy full of weeds and vines can create conditions that favor the development of downy mildew. The lack of air movement, for example, within a dense canopy can further increase humidity and allow spores to remain suspended and spread more easily. So again, weeds can hinder and make it more difficult to execute vineyard operations, anything from suckering to grape harvest, and can essentially suffocate young vines from being established. And lastly, aesthetics, which is why we have a little bit of a snapshot up there on the bar. Basically, we work in a business that is very much driven by tourism, event planning. One of the things is obviously weddings and vineyards. And so having clean rows and an inviting atmosphere is appreciated by visitors as well. Sonny, do you have anything to add so far? All good?
No, all good.
Awesome. Okay. Oops. Too fast. Okay, so here I've split our weeds into annuals and perennials, two different classes. Understanding whether a weed is an annual or perennial is crucial for effective weed control because life cycles dictate the best management practices. Annual weeds, which complete their life cycle in 1 year, are typically easier to control by preventing seed production and early seedling removal. They rely on heavy seed production for continuity and typically have simple and shallow root systems. Perennial weeds, on the other hand, live for more than 2 years and often have underground structures that allow them to resprout, requiring more persistent and targeted control methods. They rely on seeds and vegetative parts for continuity, and they may have simple or deep extensive root systems. Okay, so summer annuals and winter versus winter annuals. So here we have the pictures of some of the most common ones that we see in our vines. In Nova Scotia, the key difference between summer and winter annual weeds lies in the germination and growth timing. Summer annuals germinate in the spring and complete their life cycles by fall, while winter annuals germinate in late summer or fall. Overwinter as small plants and then complete their life cycle in the following spring, early summer. So summer annuals germinate in the spring, flower near the summer's end, and then drop their seeds before dying as temperature decreases. Their ability to grow and spread rapidly throughout the summer can make them a persistent problem. They can quickly overtake cool season grasses, often successfully competing with them for light, space, nutrients, and water. They thrive in warm temperatures. They're killed by the frost in the fall, and some of the more common examples are purslane, lamb's quarters, and pigweed. So winter annuals. Weeds complete their life cycle within a single growing season, from germination to seed production during the colder months of the year. These weeds germinate in the fall, overwinter as seedlings, and then bloom in early spring. They will then drop their seeds, beginning the life cycle again. Winter annuals can quickly take over landscapes as they aren't if they're not managed properly, since they're adept at withstanding frost and taking advantage of the early spring season. So therefore, it's important to note that a winter annual will be more difficult to manage since warmer conditions enable them to survive longer. So they germinate in late summer and early fall. They survive cold temperatures as small plants or rosettes. And some of the more common examples are field violets and pansies, chickweed, groundsel, and shepherd's purse. So in essence, summer annuals are warm season weeds that thrive in the growing season, while winter annuals are cool season weeds that are active cooler months and typically disappear within the heat of summer. So perennials. These are a little bit more difficult to manage. They persist for multiple growing seasons, regenerating from the same root system year after year. So bindweed, quackgrass, and Canada thistle are a few of the toughest to tackle. These weeds can be particularly challenging to control, since they're often pop back up for year after year. Much like winter annuals, the best time to tackle perennial broadleaf weeds is in the fall. These weeds become dormant in the winter, at which point herbicide application may no longer be effective. Applying a pre-emergent herbicide in the fall, however, will prevent weeds from overwintering and target them at the root. So some control tips would be to dig out entire root systems to prevent regrowth, apply systemic herbicides that travel to the root, follow proper agronomic practices to reduce pressure. So I will draw your attention to vetch, for example, and why it's very difficult to control. So hairy vetch has a tendency to shatter seed early in the season. It means that the seeds are released from the plant before they have a chance to fully mature. As a result, the seeds can fall to the ground and remain in the field, potentially germinating and growing as weeds later in the field. The presence of vetch as a weed can also compete with other crops or plants that farmers are trying to grow. The competition for resources such as sunlight, water, nutrients can significantly impact the growth and yield of the desired crops. Vetch can be challenging to manage in terms of its growth and spread because it is a fast-growing plant. It can quickly establish itself in an area. While this can be beneficial in terms of providing ground cover and preventing soil erosion, it can be a problem if it starts to dominate the field. So vetch can also be susceptible to certain pests and diseases, which can further impact the vine productivity and overall health. Growers may need to implement pest and disease management strategies to mitigate any potential damage to the crop. While hairy vetch can provide numerous benefits to production in agriculture, such as nitrogen fixation, which in vineyards we don't typically need a lot of, here at least in Nova Scotia, it's important to consider its disadvantages as well, as it can typically really kind of get out of control if it's not managed. So the presence of hard seed, shattering seed, potential weediness, competition with other crops, and susceptibility to pests all highlight the need for careful management. So here I have a picture of vetch actually overtaking a young vine, so you can kind of see exactly what we're talking about as well. And essentially, for young vines specifically, it can really overwhelm them and suffocate them out so that they won't be actually growing properly. One thing to really pay attention to as well is to manage the weeds inside the grow tube. So if you're having to replant and you're having to put the grow tubes on, generally you really should check inside the grow tube as well if there's some weeds there as well, and then take them out accordingly. And then here are some non-chemical controls as well. So just in case you want to kind of balance your your products and use them more sparingly, or whatever your crop management plan is for the year, these are some of the other ways of reducing the reliance on herbicides if necessary. Okay. And that's it from me. So Sonny, you're up next.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I'll just try and share my presentation here. Take me a moment to get everything queued up here. How's that looking? Sorry, you got yourself on mute there.
Oh, I just said we can see all of your slides.
Oh, okay.
So just go into presentation mode.
Is that better? All right. And we probably should start on slide 1. Okay, thanks for inviting me here today to present on herbicides and weed control. My name is Sonny Murray. Most of the time I spend my time in berry crops. And so why do you get the berry crop guy here? There's a lot of crossover in the products we use between berry crops and vineyard and orchard and that kind of thing. And weed control is just a particular interest to me from very early on in my career. That's kind of what I specialized in: weed ID and how to kill them, get them under control. This is going to be a fairly heavy chemical talk. So if you zone out on me, what I want you to think about is, what are the easiest weeds to deal with? What are the easiest weeds to control? So as you zone out, think about that question, and then we'll address that question at the end. A lot of times I think we can get lost in the details, and I think it's important to refocus on the goal. So what is the goal of weed control? The goal is to have about 18 inches on each side of the vine that's generally weed free, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish. And we want that to be generally weed free throughout the season, right? We can have a little bit of weed growth come in at the end, but we don't want those weeds to go to seed, right? Because we're going to have to deal with them next year. So we kind of keep that in the back of our mind. And how we achieve that, maybe it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, as long as we achieve it. So we can achieve it with chemicals, we can achieve it with tillage, but you're going to have to decide what works best for you, right? So we're going to go down the rabbit hole of chemicals and herbicides and talk about them in a general manner, and then try and put them together into a season-long program that perhaps might work for you in your case. So first thing we're going to do is review the products, right? So in order to do this, we have to know what tools we have on hand, what tools we have to work with, right? So these products are registered in vine crops, and they're used to control weeds. They control different weeds, and they do it in different ways, right? And we can put those into different categories. So on this slide, we put all the products that are registered into different categories. So the first category we have are post-emergent products with no residual, and they work on both grasses and broadleaves. And this is what we're most familiar with, right? Everybody's familiar with glyphosate. Goes under Roundup or Credit or Mad Dog. There's a bunch of generics out there, but I think everybody knows that one quite well. Ignite is another one. It's more of a burn down type product, works on the top, but I think everybody's familiar with it. So they work across a range of weeds. They are not very discriminatory. Therefore, we have to be very careful on the crop as well, because if we get it on the crop, we're going to cause injury, right? And we're going to see it fairly quickly. I've also thrown AIM in there as well. It tends to be a little bit weak on grasses, but it still falls into that category of being a non-discriminatory, kills or injures whatever it comes into contact with. So the other thing we need to know about these products is they have no residual, right? So they won't control weeds that come up in the next day or the next week, right? As soon as they hit the ground, we call that ground neutral. They do not affect seedlings or seeds that are germinating in the near future. So continuing on, we have pre-emergent products. These are products that have a soil residual. These products in this category have both activity on grasses and broadleaf weeds, and they will give you, they will prevent the weeds from coming up in the future or kill them as they come up, right? So products like that are Allion, Authority, Chateau, Devernol, Frontier Max, Princep 90, or Simazine. So these are products that'll give you 6-8 weeks control of those weeds and keep them from coming up. Another category is post-emergent products, and these offer no residual. And in this category, we have most of our grass products. So these are products that only work on grasses. And in that category, we have Post Ultra, Venture, and Assure. So these products will work on grasses after they come up, but give you no residual control going forward. So we have to make sure we get those products on at the right stage of the weeds. If they're too big, they're going to work very slowly and perhaps not kill them. But we can't put them on too early either. So we got to make sure that we time everything just right for those products. Those products are very safe on broadleaves. We don't have to worry much about injury onto the crop itself, because grapes, of course, are a broadleaf crop. Post-emergent residual products that work on grass but have limited broadleaf control is our last category. And in that, we have a Prism and Shakara, which we don't tend to see a lot used, but we can integrate those into the program as well. So as we go through, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each one of those products and talk specifically about them. So what I failed to mention on the previous slide was these numbers in brackets after the product. And the Weed Science Society of America has put similar products into categories and groups or families. And these are products that have the same mode of action, right? So we think of products that are in the same class or the same family as working similarly, but there can be little differences between them, right? So the way that I'm going to review the products through this presentation is we're going to go through each group, and then we're going to look specifically at some of the products. So our first group or family of herbicides is group 1. So in this group, we have a Post-Ultra, Venture, and Assure. These provide post-emergent activity on a broad range of annual and perennial grasses. So these products only work on grasses, and timing is key on these products because you want to catch them when they're in that generally 4 to 6 leaf stage. Once you get beyond that, product activity falls off and the weeds may recover. They offer a very limited residual going forward, so you want to put them on after the weeds have come up. And these products have no activity on broadleaf crops or weeds. All right, so we can be very reassured that they're safe on the crop if we tend to get a little bit of drift, as they won't control broadleaf weeds at all. And we tend to go out and say that as a blanket statement that these products work on all grasses, but that's not exactly true. They have much poorer activity on fescues and bluegrass. And of course, they won't control sedges or rushes because they're not a grass, right? So keep that in mind that we have to do a little bit of a job identifying that grass to make sure that these products will work on that grass. In saying that, Assure too does have some activity on bluegrass. So bluegrass tends to be a bit of a problem. It will sometimes come in as a weed on the grass seed that we use in the laneways and then spread into your herbicide strip from there. So keep that in mind. So they have weaknesses on bluegrass. Also, Post-Ultra can be quite weak on quackgrass. Very safe on the crop. You have to watch your pre-harvest interval because it's either 14 days or 30 days, depending on which product you select from within that family. These are very safe on grapes, and we can use them in new and established plantings. They tend to be very slow acting, so keep that in mind. Be patient. It's going to take 10 days before you start to see that grass start to drop off. It works on the growing point of that grass. So if you start to get impatient, you can pull on the flag leaf of the grass, the uppermost leaf, and it should pull out from the growing point. And if you look on the growing point, that should be rotten. And if it's really working, it'll even start to smell. So you'll know it's working. The rest of the plant should collapse after that. And as I said before, apply generally when the grasses are in that 1 to 6 leaf stage, but check the label for specific species, and it could differ depending on the grass species that you're trying to control. I just put a note on the bottom of the slide that Post-Ultra is back on the market. Last year it was rumored to be leaving the market, and production was quite low on it. Group 2 herbicides, so moving on to a different family of herbicides. It includes Prism and Shakara. These are post-emergent or pre-emergent control of select grasses and broadleaf weeds. Narrow selection of weeds controlled depending on the product. So with these, you really have to be able to identify your weeds and match them up with the label. Okay, so it's not a broad spectrum control. They're very select narrow window of weeds that these control. They have limited or short-term pre-emergent activity depending on the product, so there's a little bit of variability in this class. Prism has a short residual, and Shakara has a very long residual to it. And soil persistence is dependent on the pH. So these products will last longer in the soil and give you more control closer to that neutral pH. And it'll be shorter as your pH drops. Looking specifically at Prism, you want to put it on post-emergent to the weeds. It does offer a short residual for broadleaf and grass weeds. The grapevines have to be established for at least 1 year. With Prism, it's very important that you use a surfactant with it. And if you leave that surfactant out, you'll get very disappointing results. So make sure you read that label and get that surfactant in there. You're allowed a maximum of 2 applications per year. The pre-harvest interval is about 21 days. Your broadleaf weeds want to be in that 4 to 6 leaf stage, and it does offer decent activity on quackgrass, and quackgrass needs to be in that 3 to 6 leaf stage. And again, it's relatively slow to work. What you'll see initially is reddening, and that's very common to this class of chemicals. You'll start to see reddening of the veins from this product. Relatively slow to work, and it has a short residual. Shakara, group 2, similar to Prism, but it has a much longer residual. Can be applied anytime throughout the year, but it's best if you target that spring or fall period. And if you put it on in the fall, it should last into the early spring. Controls mini grasses and broadleaf weeds. It could be applied pre and post. But your grapes have to be 3 years old or older. You're only allowed 1 application per year, and I just wanted to draw attention to the 75-day pre-harvest interval, right? So that can get pretty long, right? So you start to think, okay, I want to take those grapes off September 1st. You're way back May 18th, I think, when I do the math. So you've got to keep that in mind when you're applying that product, or where you're going to position it in your program. Moving on to the group 5 herbicides, Princep or Simazine. These offer both pre and post-emergent control of annual grasses and broadleaf weeds. Decent activity or control of some perennials. It's got a very long soil residual lasting about 10 weeks. It's the foundation of many weed control programs across a lot of crops. Group 5s are used in corn, soybeans, potatoes. And as a result, that kind of led to some of the overuse or misuse of this class. And as a result, we have some resistance development going on in Nova Scotia. So we have resistant populations of barnyard grass, pigweed, lamb's quarters, ragweed. Some of those are the common ones. So you got to kind of remember that, right? So if you're targeting ragweed, or if you have a big problem with ragweed, even though ragweed is on the label of these products, it's probably not going to do the job you want it to do, okay? So you may have to mix this product in with something else. Still a great family, all right? But you have to know how to position it within your program so that you're coming in with something else that's going to control those resistant weeds like your ragweed and that kind of thing. Moving on to the group 9s, won't spend a lot of time on it because I think everybody knows what Roundup is and how to use it. It's a post-emergent activity for control of both grasses and broadleaf weeds. No soil activity. When you're putting it on, you got to be very careful not to get the drift up onto your vines, or you will see injury. And you also have to make sure you keep it off the suckers as well. Roundup is very systemic within the plant, and it will travel on you within that plant. So any drift, and you start to see it primarily in the growing tips. Something I think we need to keep in mind is that some weeds are just naturally hard to kill with Roundup, right? It's not that resistance has developed in them. There's just something about those weeds that make them hard to kill with Roundup. And these include vetch, willow herb. We see more commonly field bindweed and horsetail. So keep that in mind, that you may have to target those specific weeds with something else other than Roundup if you want to get the upper hand. Planting should be 3 years or older. 14-day pre-harvest interval, maximum of 3 applications per year. As I said before, no residual activity in the soil. It's readily taken up and translocated through the plant, so remember that. It needs to go on post-emergent to the weeds. Effective control of most grasses and broadleaves. Make sure that we don't get the drift of this product up onto the grapevines. So that brings us to group 10. I think everybody's probably fairly familiar with Ignite. Ignite is a post-emergent control of a broad range of annual broadleaves and grasses. It's a product that we relied fairly heavily on in the past. We'd often rotate Roundup and Ignite and not use any residual products. And I think that kind of led to people maybe not knowing how to get the most out of Ignite. Important to know that Ignite doesn't translocate in the plant the way Roundup does, so it'll burn the top off of perennials and that kind of thing, and they may regrow from the root. And it's important to know that there's no residual control with Ignite. And so if we're trying to target certain weeds, I think we have to ask ourselves, where is that growing point? The growing point is up high in the axis of the leaves and on the weeds. We can get the product on there, kill that growing point, we get control. But if we're looking at a perennial where the growing point is at ground level or below, or we're not getting the coverage that we want, then we're probably not going to get the control we're looking for, and the weed is going to regrow. So when we're targeting certain weeds, we have to ask ourselves, where is that growing point? Are we getting sufficient coverage on that growing point? So as a result, smaller weeds are more easily controlled with Ignite. And Ignite can be kind of finicky, and I often see this product misused or people disappointed in the results from it. And I think that has led from, and I'm not sure how much time we have for history, but we used to have Gramoxone, right? And Gramoxone was pretty foolproof. And then that was replaced with Ignite. And Ignite, we have to be very careful about the time of day, right? So we should be putting it on full sun, peak temperature, dry canopy. We want to go out during banker's hours and put it on. So we want to start at 9 and we want to wrap it up by 3 and go home for the rest of the day. So when we get outside of that, we can be very disappointed in the results that we get. And I've used it in field crops where we're spraying a lot of acres and we're pushed for timing, and we end up applying it on an overcast, dank day. It's fairly dry, but there's no sun, and we get no weed control whatsoever. And we have to come back and respray all those acres. So it's a great product, but we have to know how to use it. So time of day is very important, dry foliage, or else it can be difficult to get a good kill. The other things that we have to remember, a maximum of 2 applications per year, right? And this product offers no residual control, right? So it's hard to get season-long control out of just using a product like Ignite, because you're going to burn things down, things germinate, or our perennials are going to regrow. And by the time that we put on our second one, things are looking quite green again. So we do it again, and it's just not enough to carry you through the season alone. And the other thing we have to worry about is the 40-day pre-harvest interval, right? So we can't get it close enough to harvest, in my mind, in order to carry us through harvest without the weeds coming up and taking over. Again, and I want to drive this point home, think about what you're doing when you're using this product. We need a 4-hour rain-free interval. We want to put it on in full sun. It doesn't translocate very well within that plant, so coverage is absolutely key. There is a little bit of a translocation, but again, you need that perfect weather to make it happen. So if you're using this product, coverage is key. It's easier to get coverage on small weeds, right? Very hard to get coverage on larger weeds. So we want to make sure that those weeds are small, but we also want to make sure that we're using an adequate water volume to get that coverage. So again, I'm going to say it again because I want you to remember: effective under bright sunlight, high humidity, moist soils, but dry foliage. Smaller weeds, put it on in banker's hours, and increase your water volume to get your coverage. Okay, so I beat that horse to death. Moving on to group 14 herbicides. Group 14 is quite a range within this category. We have Authority and Chateau, which work quite similarly, and we have AIM that works quite different. So these products will give you a little bit of, well, they'll give you a whole lot of pre-emergent activity and a little bit of post activity, except for AIM, who's the opposite. AIM works much better post-emergent. Common among all of these products, limited grass activity, and that's a bit of a shortfall of these products. They work terrific on broadleaves. Post-emergent activity relies on burning, so it doesn't translocate within the plant. So keep that in mind. With Authority and Chateau, you want to create that soil boundary layer, and once you get it on there, you don't want to disturb it. Okay, so any tillage that you do or hoeing, that kind of thing, will destroy that layer on the top of the soil, and the weeds will be free to break. Soil activity tends to last 6 to 8 weeks, and it'll get you through that spring period a lot of times where the weeds are germinating. Drift may cause burning, so it's important not to get it on the plant, or you'll get stippling, burning of the leaf. The other thing that we run into from time to time, especially in the valley where we have dry, sandy soils, is the chemical will bind to the soil, and if that gets picked up by wind erosion and lands on your plant in an adjacent field, you can see a little bit of damage from that. So keep that in mind. You don't want to put it on roadways or that kind of thing where you create a dust and the dust lands on the plants. You don't want to see that. Looking specifically at Authority, again, pre-emergent to the weeds, residual product for broadleaf weeds. The thing that distinguishes Authority from Chateau is Authority is a little bit weak on ragweed compared to Chateau. Other than that, they work really quite similarly. Authority has to be on plantings that are established at least 1 year. Minimal soil disturbance, as I said, after applying. Maximum 1 application per year. It's an extremely effective product, weak on ragweed. Pre-harvest interval is 3 days, but I think where you're going to position it is early in the season or late in the season. I don't think you're going to be in there in crop, but putting it on most often. Can be applied to spring or fall. Avoid application to green bark, again, because you can get that burning. Minimize drift onto green tissue. Chateau, and again, this is a bit of a repeat. Pre-emergent to the weeds, residual control product for broadleaf weeds. Established planting of at least 2 years. Minimize soil disturbance after applying. It's an extremely effective product on a broad range of broadleaf weeds. The pre-harvest interval is 60 days, right? So you're going to be stuck with spring or fall with this product as well. So then we get the odd cat in this group or family, AIM. And AIM, I look as an alternative to Ignite. So Ignite, you can only make 2 applications per year, and it's pretty finicky on the weather. AIM is a little bit less so. The weeds still have to be actively growing. It'll give you that burn down that you're looking for. So I tend to say, if you limit it out on your Ignite, you can use AIM. You can also use it in the spring or the fall where the weather isn't quite conducive to Ignite. The weeds still have to be actively growing, but we can get away with slightly worse weather. All group 14 herbicides are pretty poor on grass. So if you're targeting grass, what you might have to do is put a group 1 gramiticide in with it. to target those grasses. So something like a post-ultra or venture tank mixed with your aim, and then all of a sudden you can control most weeds that are there. So I think I covered everything there. Moving on to group 15s, you're looking at Frontier Max or Devernol. These tend to be pre-emergent control for annual grasses and a few broadleaf weeds. Rainfall after application of these products is very important. Devernol has a broader range of control on broadleaf weeds than Frontier Max, but they still tend to be a little bit selective. And you can expect to get 6 weeks residual control out of them. Frontier Max, again, put it on pre-emergent to the weeds, residual product for broadleaf and grass weeds. It doesn't get a lot of different types of broadleafs, but it's very good on nightshades, pigweeds. It's just okay on lamb's quarters. It'll get ragweed fairly well as well. The beauty of Frontier Max is you can use it on new plantings as well as established ones. Maximum 1 application per year, and you can expect to get pretty well full season control out of it as long as we don't do any tillage in there. Pre-harvest intervals 30 days. Rainfall after application again is very important for the uptake or dispersal of the herbicide. Devernol, we don't tend to see a lot of it used anymore. It's an older product. It's quite effective where it's effective, but if we put it on wrong, you'll be extremely disappointed. Devernol pre-emergent to the weeds. It needs to go on soon after when you have bare soil. So soon after in the spring. It's a residual product. It's very good on groundsel if you get trouble with groundsel, lady slalom mustards. It needs to go on established plantings, maximum 1 application per year. Pre-harvest interval is not mentioned on it, on the label, but you must have rainfall right after application. And I put a maximum of 7 days in spring or fall when the days are cooler. But in summer, you need it within 2 days or you lose effectiveness of the product. This product will actually gas off on you and evaporate. So if we can get that rainfall, we can get excellent control out of the product. But if we don't get the rainfall, we get no control out of the product. And that's tends to be why you don't see it used as much anymore. It used to be a granular product. Now it's a liquid product, and the rate is crazy high on it. You read the label and you think, well, that must be a mistake. So just know that the label is crazy high. So it may not be cost effective for some growers, but it's a good product where it works. And if it doesn't work, it's a terrible product. Which brings us to group 29 herbicides. Allion and Kazaron. Allion, I think, is fairly commonly used around. Kazaron, not so much. Kazaron, we tend to use it mainly in raspberries, but I included it here because it is registered, and it is a great product, but it's a granular product, and people, because it's granular, have a hard time getting it on properly and knowing what to do with it, right? So a great product, but just not often used. Allion, commonly used. And it offers control of limited control of emerged weed, but it's excellent pre-emergent. A broad range control of both broadleaf weeds and grasses, and you should be able to get a 16-week residual out of it. So because it has such a good residual and very soil active, we want to put it on established plantings of at least 5 years. So we can keep it out of the root zone and know that those vines are well established and not see injury to those vines. And there's also a warning on the label. You know, you don't want to put it in, you don't want to apply it before soil disturbance, including hilling or dehilling, because you could mix it into that root zone. Also, when you're doing that soil disturbance, you're breaking down that weed control barrier at the soil surface. So you'll lose your weed control. It's an extremely effective product. Pre-harvest interval is 14 days. You can apply it once per season and can be applied throughout the growing season. So those are the tools that we have to work with, right? So how do we take all those tools and how do we use them? When do we use them? Um, how do we take all this stuff and effectively put it into a program where we can be sure that we're going to get weed control through the season. So I thought the best way to try and do this is go into a situation, right? So in this situation, case study, you can call it, a new planted vineyard, what do we have to think about there, right? So I'm not sure how people prepare their site, but they should be spending a lot of time preparing their site before the vines ever go in the ground. So if we do all that, there tends to be a lot of soil disturbance happening before we put those vines in. What kind of weeds do we usually deal with that first year, right? So I'm gonna pause and let that sink in. Usually the first year we're dealing with annuals, right? Surely by that time we'd have the perennials under control. They shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be green. So we just have the emerging annuals to deal with in year one. What typically happens that first year? I know what happens in the berry crop. People tend to be busy in the spring. They rush, they plant, and then they walk away, right? Because I'm busy over here looking after what's going to make me money. I forget about the new planting. I got to wrap up pruning. I got to start my fungicide spraying. Oh, by the way, I got a life and a wife. I forget about the new planting, right? And that's pretty dangerous. By the time I get back to the new planting, everything's out of control, right? The vines are up, they're green. Maybe I don't, or maybe I do have the grow tubes on, but the weeds are out of control, right? So we gotta rein that in a little bit, try and get better control. I know that doesn't happen on anybody else's farm. It only happens on berry farms. So we have the troublesome. So what I wanted to do was put this program together on paper, right? So across the top, we have the troublesome weeds across the top that are giving us trouble on our fictitious farm. And then down the side, I have the actions that we're going to do, right? So we're going to rate the herbicides on those troublesome weeds as we go down and go through the year, right? So again, this is on a new planting. What would we do? So the first thing we want to do is plant and then quickly install the grow tubes. And we don't want to plant and then a month later install the grow tubes, right? Because the grow tubes are going on there for a reason, right? It's a little greenhouse for the plants that protects the plants. So we want to make sure we get them on for the full length of the season, right? So we can get some good out of those grow tubes. So put the grow tubes right on right away. When we're installing those, we want to make sure that we cover that ground in with dirt, right? If we have a flow coming up through there, we're not getting the heat buildup within that grow tube. But if we're spraying besides that too, we can see air current come up through there and it'll carry some of those very small droplets up through that grow tube, deposit them on your nice new vine that you paid for, and perhaps injure or if not kill that vine, right? So make sure that we plant those grow tubes and get a good seal on the dirt at the bottom end. Then before we run away, we're going to get Frontier Max on. So Frontier Max, we now know that it's a pre-emergent product that gives control of mostly grasses, but also some broadleaf weeds. So, I was a little bit hard on Frontier Max when I was going through my description, but it's very good on annuals, right? And in that first year, we're mostly concerned about our annuals. So we can get that on right away. We don't want to go away and say, I'll get it on later, right? Because in the meantime, weeds are going to come up, they're going to establish, and Frontier doesn't work on emerged weeds. So before we run away and forget about it, this is one of the last steps we do in there, right? And then after we get that Frontier on, we want to try not to disturb that soil surface, right? Because when we disturb that soil surface, we're bringing up more weed seeds to the surface to germinate. And we've also erased that barrier of the herbicide that we left on top of the soil, right? So what I did was, we got our perennials, we have our winter annuals. Hopefully you can see my cursor on the screen. We got our annuals way over to the right. I can find efficacy table, it's called, and that'll tell me what weeds it's effective. So by looking at that efficacy table, and that's what we see here, I know it's very good on purslane, which is a troublesome weed, lamb's quarter, pigweed. It'll give decent control of those. So that should last through the season as long as I don't disturb the soil surface. The other thing I can do is if I see weeds coming up, I know I still have those post-emergent non-selective products in the back pocket. I can come in with a product like AIM, right? So why did I choose AIM over Ignite? Right, this is my first year. There's a warning on the label of Ignite. I can't use it until 2 years. 2 years of establishment, but AIM I can get away with, right? So depending on what weeds are present, I might want to put a venture or a post or an assure in with that AIM to take care of the grasses, right? But if I just have a few broadleaves, I can skip through with the AIM. So you got to be very careful with it, of course, right? It needs to be a directed spray. We have our grow tubes there, so we shouldn't get a lot of drift on the vine itself, so it's protected. So what I did in my chart here was, I'm relying on the burning of that AIM product, right? So do I get good control with it? Yes, I do if the weeds are small. If they're large, I may not get control of it, right? So down at the bottom, I said, do not let the weeds establish and grow large before addressing them. I can get good control of a harsh perennial even if I get it when it's small. So that should take me through that first year. I have 2 applications of AIM in my back pocket that I can use if I need them. I can put venture in with it if I have a grass problem. That should get me through. I think the other thing that we really need to be doing as an industry is looking at a fall cleanup. You think about what's happening out there in the vineyard or the orchard, you have a huge amount of weeds that will germinate through that fall period, and they don't look very big. They look pretty unassuming. But if they're allowed to establish, they'll get quite unruly by the time you get back there next spring, right? So we can come in after a leaf drop even and clean those up. It'll put you in a much better position for the next year. So I put that in the program as well. Late fall cleanup with AIM, grass herbicide, keeping in mind that it can't be so late that the weeds aren't actively growing. So keep that in mind. It can't be Christmas, but late October, yeah, absolutely, we can control those weeds. So that gets you through year 1, right? Year 2, we still don't have a lot of products available to us just because of the warnings on the label. So we're going to run the program pretty well the same. We can start the spring with our Frontier Max. We're working in a clean field in the spring because we put our product on in the fall for the fall cleanup, right? So not a lot of weeds have come up yet. We can put our Frontier Max on. We can use Prism depending on what weeds we have come there. We know now that Prism is very good on grasses, but it's also targets a lot of our annual broadleaf weeds. So I can refer back to my efficacy table, see what weeds I have there, what weeds are going to be controlled with Prism. I still have AIM in my back pocket. And I can use it fairly late in the year in both the establishment year and year 2 because I don't have to worry about harvest, right? There's no pre-harvest interval because there's no grapes there at this time. Okay, so that'll get me through my first 2 years. I thought I'd throw this in here as a scenario of what to do when you're interplanting a vineyard, because we're still dealing with the big freeze from a couple years ago. There's some things in there that we have to remember, right? So I think you have to look at it as a case by case. If I have a decent vineyard and it didn't have a lot of injury, and I'm replacing just a few vines in there, and if they're not scattered throughout the whole planting, I can probably treat that as a mature planting and just not spray those young vines, right? That still takes a pretty good operator. He's got to remember to shut it off when it comes up to those young vines and turn it back on afterwards. God, heaven forbid if we forgot to turn it back on, but things happen when you're out there all day, right? That takes a good operator, and I'm not sure everybody's up to that, right? And if we have more dead vines than live ones, it's probably not worth doing. The other thing I think we should be remembering is we have to have the weeds under control before we put those new young vines in there, right? There's no good setting out those new young vines in a herbicide strip that's filled with pretty aggressive perennials, right? So make sure that we get out there early, and we can do that anytime now. Get a little bit of Roundup on, especially in those blank spaces, and let that Roundup work before we interplant it with our young vines. And I think we have to remember what we have out there for a herbicide too. If we have something like an Allion or a Group 5 Simazine or Princep 9T, we don't want that residual herbicide to be used in the planting hole when we set that young vine in there. So we might have to bring soil in from outside of the vineyard in order to fill that planting hole. And I think we have to think about where we're getting that soil to bring in, right? Is it full of weeds? Or is it from a cornfield? If it's from a cornfield, it might have herbicide residual in there as well that we don't want to use in the hole. I've seen it happen. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've been involved in a number of cases. We tracked the issue back to the cornfield where we got the topsoil to plant the young plant. Things can happen. So anyway, what would that look like? And really what it would look like is we're going to go back to the same herbicide program that we use on a newly planted vineyard. We're just going to put it on older plants on some of that vineyard. The thing that we have to remember is get the Roundup on pre-plant. I think that's all I wanted to cover on that slide. So what would a standard program look like on a mature vineyard? And again, we have the same perennial, winter annual weeds across the top. And we're rating each one of those herbicides that we're applying on those weeds. And hopefully at the end of the day, we shouldn't have any of them escape us. I think this is a very valuable exercise to go through, and depending on the size of your vineyard, if you're the only manager there, if you're the guy, I think it's very valuable to go through just so you know what you have for tools before the season starts and where to position them. And I think if you have a larger vineyard, maybe this is something you should be getting your herbicide guy to do, just to empower him to show that what he's doing makes a difference and there's a reason why we do things, right? Rather than jot the recipe down on the piece of paper, give it to him, and he really has no idea what he's applying or why. It may show him the bigger picture. So I think it's a very useful exercise. So let's run through it. So in this program, what I said is first thing we'll go out with the AIM first thing in the spring because it's not quite so finicky when it comes to the weather. AIM, we have to put a surfactant with it. So that's what I have here is the Ag Surf. and I have the Allium there as well. So Allium, we know, doesn't work very well post-emergent. So we're putting it on in the spring, and it has a very long residual control. So we're going to throw that all in the same tank and put it on at once. So we're getting our burn down, and we're getting our residual control. Very important. I think we need to look at our reentry period for those products, so we know when we can send our workers back in to finish up the pruning. I also listed the Weeds Science of Society of America herbicide group, so that we're not over applying any particular group or relying too much on any particular group. And we also have our pre-harvest interval there, right? So if we can start recording those things from the get-go, then people are thinking about them all the time, right? Mistakes may not happen, and we don't have to go looking for them in season either, right? Because we got to fill out our paperwork, and who has time to do that in July? So if we can record that along the way, I think it's a big benefit to everybody. So again, the aim is going to give us our burn down, and that's what those X's kind of signify to me. Allium, we can find the rating for it, and it's going to catch a lot of our weeds, but some of them it's going to miss. Some like vetch and quackgrass. All right, so we may have to do something later on in order to control those weeds. So the next kick at the can that we have, I wrote down, I didn't specify a specific product, and we probably should. If we see that grasses are becoming out of control, we can come in post-emergent with a grass product. So again, you have your post-ultra, venture, assure. So 12-hour reentry, depending on what product we pick, it can be either 14 or 30-day pre-harvest interval. And the only true grass we have there is quackgrass. So post-ultra is a little bit weak on it. Venture, assure are very good on it. So we'd probably pick one of those and give it a rating of 9. So we know we can get those under control. The next product we can come in with, and again, these are post-emergent products. Now, the last two products that we looked at, this is another post-emergent, is Prism, but Prism will also give us a residual product, residual control. And I think it's important to put a residual product on a little bit later, because yeah, things might look good now, but I'm going to get awful busy when I get into harvest, right? And I'm not going to have time to worry about those weeds. So if I can come in closer to harvest and extend that residual control a little bit more, then I'm going to come out the other end of harvest looking pretty good. So even though you may not have a weed problem there at that time, the short residual at a Prism, may be worth something to you. So again, I rated it on those weeds as we go across. The other thing, we haven't used any Ignite yet either, right? So we can come in with Ignite. If we have some weeds that aren't on the Prism label, we can come in with Ignite and burn those off, again, respecting the pre-harvest interval. So we still have that in the back pocket. We still have another application of AIM in our back pocket that we can use if we need to. The last thing, and I think, with that program, we should still be coming up to harvest. Sorry, we should be coming up to fall, still pretty clean. We still want to do that fall cleanup with Roundup and Chateau. So you'll notice that I haven't put a whole lot of Roundup in the program at all, but I think we can position our Roundup where we can get the best use out of it, right? So all your winter annuals and your perennials are setting themselves up in the fall. They're translocating their energy down to that root system. If we put Roundup on at that time, we can get a very good kill on those tough to kill perennials, right? And we can get some control out of them. So a lot of people are kind of against the use of Roundup. They hear a lot of stuff coming into the forestry industry, and there's a lot of press and PR around it. And I don't think we should not be using Roundup. I think we should be using Roundup in a very judicious way where we can get the best use out of it, right? So putting it on in the fall allows you to get the best use out of it. In this case, I put it with a residual product, and that residual product is going to last into the spring. A lot of times, we have a big flush of weeds in the spring, but we're also very busy in the spring. So this just helps you be a little bit lax in the spring. We can get our other work done while we know our weeds aren't getting out of control on us, right? So it tends to calm your spring down a little bit. So that's an example of a program that we could put into use on an established vineyard. I'm not saying that this is the best program. I'm just saying that, it's an example, and it's a program that could work for us. And you'll notice that, we still didn't get very good control of our vetch. That is a tough weed, right? But what should be happening is we should be getting control of it before we ever put the vines in the ground. So it's a perennial weed. Make sure that we're using the right products. There are other products that we can use before we put vines in the ground that'll get control of it. And there's also products we can use in other crops to get control of it. So before we ever put a vine in the ground, we should have vetch under control. Easy for me to say. As you get age on your vineyard, it may creep in from non-crop areas, and it's going to be tough on that particular weed. Field bindweed is another tough one. It tends to come up quite late in the season, so maybe your residual is running out, and then it decides to germinate and emerge. And again, a weed like that, your fall cleanup with your Roundup is going to be very helpful. What can happen is, right, we have Roundup and we can put it on in the spring, but the weed's not up, we don't get control of it, right? So Roundup is very effective on it, but the weed has to be up, it has to be present. And so again, I think that fall cleanup is very important on it. Oh, I forgot we kind of went down this rabbit hole too. So the other thing that you may be coming across is, okay, Sonny, that's all nice and great, but we do hilling for winter protection, right? We've gone through the freeze. We bought the gear to hill so we can get winter protection. How do we incorporate herbicides into that program so that everything is still working together? So we have soil disturbance again, which we don't necessarily have in all the vineyards. So when we start to get soil disturbance, we start to get annual weeds, right? But we have a little bit of soil disturbance, but not a lot. So we also have perennial weeds. So it's the worst of both worlds, right? We're going to have perennial weed problems, and we're going to have annual weed problems. The other thing we need to think about is, there may be a little bit of shallow root disturbance. Are we going to get a little bit of herbicide incorporated down into that root zone? We got to think about that a little bit. We got to make sure that we don't put on residual herbicides and then come in with our soil disturbance and erase that weed barrier that we've put down. So one thing that I think is very important is, if we're going to hill, that soil should be fairly weed free when we put that hill on, right? Or it's not going to collapse around that the vine and offer you the protection that you want, right? You think about moldboard plowing a field, right, and how that rolls over. If you're doing it on bare ground, everything crumbles in pretty tight. But if you have a fairly grassy sod, everything just kind of sticks up in the air, and it's a bit of a bugger to plow. And the same kind of concept is happening here. So if we can have fairly weed-free, clot-free soil, we can turn it over much easier. And it looks like I removed my thing, but what you need to do there is you can still use your Allion in the spring after you take that hill down. You can use Allion. You have the full summer for it to break down. In the fall, I think what we need to be doing is putting on our Roundup a little bit earlier, and we're going to put our Roundup on alone. So you're going to run the same program as you would on an established vineyard. When you come to the fall cleanup, you're going to put a Roundup on a little bit earlier, and you're going to put it on alone without a residual product in with it. That'll give your weeds time to die, and also break down, so you can get the more friable soil. That'll be easier to manipulate. So that kind of concludes everything I was going to present, which brings us back to the question that I posed at the top of the presentation. Which weeds are easiest to control? The ones that are easiest to control are the weeds that don't come up. The ones that are controlled by residual herbicide, right? We don't have to worry about how big they're getting. We don't have to time our herbicide with the stage of the weeds. We don't have to worry about pre-harvest intervals, right? So anyway, bit of a trick question. I just wanted to get some people thinking about how to use some of those products. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions while we're still here?
Yeah, any questions at all? I'd be happy to.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing so far. So the one thing I am going to mention is our pest management guide. It is freshly updated. We've been working since basically, yeah, mid-November to get it done and ready for the season. So it is an invaluable tool to use. It really is. Most of the questions that you'll probably have will be answered there. If you have any additional questions, we are all here to help you as well. So contact us, let us know if you have any issues using the platform as well, or if you require a visit from us, we will gladly come up and meet you. So thank you all very, very much for today and listening to us and seeing us here. Apologies again for the technical issues at the beginning, but I hope to see you all very, very soon. Thank you, Sonny. And see you all again soon.